What's going on, guys? It's Adam P, and welcome back to more Newcastle United transfer news. Yet again, Newcastle United has been done dirty in the transfer market. We talk about Chelsea. It's always Chelsea, let's be honest. They found another loophole in this transfer market, which has been able to benefit them while damaging a club like Newcastle and, of course, our teams in the Premier League as well. And, of course, in my other videos, we talk about incoming signings and the current situation regarding players at this football club who are going on strike and looking to leave. And it's a case where we're going to have a look at the wider perspective of the transfer market today, and just to explain how, even though under PSR laws, Newcastle's allowed to spend money now, so it's not a case we're being held back by PSR in that respect, but we are still being held back by PSR because of the wage structure, so we are not allowed to be able to bump our wages up. You see Newcastle competing with elite level signings this summer. We have lost out on good players because teams are able to offer more money, while Newcastle has a very strict schedule. And you talk about a certain someone behind the scenes. Let's be honest, he should be on more money so you can understand his frustration. But from Newcastle, they're sticking with it. They're not up in that wage structure. It will stay the same. It will stay that way, so we are able to get players in who want to be here while not losing money long term, which could result in something like a points deduction. If you guys are new around here, just before we get into things, make sure I get down there, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming Newcastle United transfer news, and of course going into videos with detail explaining what's going on and what is happening in today's transfer market. So how is Chelsea being dodgy this time? And I wouldn't say dodgy to some respect because they are following the Premier League rules. You can't deny it, and I've got to respect it somewhat as well because they're being able to always find loopholes. They're quite a smart club and they know how to get around the system to be able to better themselves. So Julian Cisco has left Brighton, but he's not joining Chelsea. He's actually joining Blue Core. So he's joining the ownership party of Chelsea. I've never seen this book, by the way. So the ownership of Chelsea have signed the player, and Cisco is contracted to the ownership. So he's going to Strasbourg now for a season, and then is joining Chelsea next year. So that's how Chelsea's been able to get around. So Chelsea officially has not made this signing, which means Chelsea's finances, this is just a free hit. It's just nothing because they haven't signed them. The ownership signed them, and it's a rule that they've somehow been able to get one over the Premier League. And I've got a couple of, I guess, issues with the current situation now. The first one being, I don't know what it is between Brighton and Chelsea, but there's a weird relationship from signings. Look at the amount of players over the last 3 years who have joined Chelsea from Brighton. Cucurella, around 60 million euros, went from Brighton to Chelsea. Robert Sanchez, goalkeeper, went from Brighton to Chelsea. You've got Caicedo, record-breaking transfer at the time, Brighton to Chelsea. You've got Nsusco, the latest signing, Brighton to Chelsea. João Pedro, Brighton to Chelsea. And it's one where both clubs have been quite back and forth, especially over the last 3 years, from players coming in and players coming out. And even from Brighton's point of view as well, they've got the likes of Billy Gilmore, of course, coming from Chelsea's youth squad into Brighton's team. So when you look at the players here, they've worked a lot of transactions amongst each other. And of course, there's nothing stopping the two teams from doing that. But Brighton's benefited heavily because Chelsea coming in with massive fees for players, which of course allows Brighton under FFP to be able to splash money out. It was almost kind of like Brighton have almost a training camp for Chelsea. So Brighton get a good player, grow them up, and then Chelsea just buys them for mega money. And it's happening every single season now. Past 3 seasons in a row, Chelsea have walked over to Brighton and have essentially bought out their best player. So they walk in, spend all the money there, and then walk out. So Chelsea's able to get good players by Brighton, while Brighton's making a lot of money. So it's almost like the two clubs are working in unison, which, again, I've got no evidence to provide anything more than the evidence you see in terms of transactions. But that's the first thing I get my tinfoil hat on and say. But the obvious and bad thing you would say is the fact that the ownership has been able to gain the acquisition of a player, not Chelsea, Blue Core. And you just can't believe how Chelsea are able to think outside the box. Of course, so they own hotels to themselves, so they own women's team to themselves. And now the ownership buying players, the football club's not even getting them until next year. Chelsea, of course, historically had these 7 to 8 year long contracts, which means that they were able to spread payments across such a long sustainable period of time. They've had the loan structure and had about 10 players out on loan every summer. Chelsea's always the club that looks at the Premier League rule book and they just look at ways of getting around it. And again, by law, they're not doing anything unlawful, but it is not a coincidence. It's always Chelsea, and it's a club that has an incredibly smart business strategy and incredibly smart ownership that just knows exactly how to play with the Premier League. And my issue isn't necessarily Chelsea, my issue is the rules, because of course, with the PSR rulings, Newcastle gets done over. Teams like Villa get done over. You talk about Newcastle and Villa. Villa just sold as Jacob Ramsey. That's a player they did not want to sell at all. But of course, during the rulings, when they need to sell players in order to be able to gain profits long term, it has to happen. We did it last season. Eddie Anderson went to Nottingham Forest, and even it seemed like Forest has been able to benefit somewhat by getting these players in. But in a couple of years' time, they'll have to sell. Newcastle has to sell. West Ham has to sell. Brighton will continue to sell to Chelsea in this case. So when you look at the options now, Chelsea's always going to get better, but teams below Chelsea, our teams in the league, don't get better because the rulings restrict those teams from being able to push up. So Chelsea's the smartest team because they always find a way around. And the argument against that is, why do teams like Newcastle, teams like Villa, why do these sort of teams not go out of their way to do stuff like this? And even if they were to go out and do stuff like this, there's still FFP and PSR, which stops teams like us from being able just to do this to the levels of Chelsea are. They've got about 50 players. They've got an incredible amount of sellable players. And even when you look at the players he brought in, I speak the Newcastle point of view. We wanted João Pedro and Leon Delap at the start of the transfer window. Leon Delap's came in at the time, was probably expected to be more or less starting striker. Again, more strikers came in after him, and I feel like the players, in terms of negotiations, in terms of what they expect coming into the football club, I'm willing to bet Leon Delap wouldn't have been taught at the time. We're going to say another striker after you within the next month or so. So when you see all these new players coming in, it's almost kind of like, in their point of view, they might have expected a bit more in terms of where they would be inside Chelsea's squad. And it's not a video solely devoted to Chelsea because, of course, we can mention the Premier League and mention the rules all you want. But I think Newcastle gets heavily restricted by teams that are able to go out their way and just to splash money and to be able to do all these loopholes around the rulings. But I mean, the rule itself is just so anti-competitive. You look at the Premier League table this season, you look at how it's going to go this season, you can predict the top four from a mile away. There's no way Liverpool, City, Arsenal and Chelsea are not finishing the top four. And it doesn't matter what order it is. Those four teams will finish in the top four. Surely those four teams do not drop out. There's just no way on a competitive stance how those four teams do not get in the top four, because there's such a strong gap ahead of the rest of the teams in the league. And that's how the Premier League structure works. It is designed to be anti-competitive to the other teams. It's designed, I would say, that your big six, as you would call it, that the other teams aren't able to compete. They can't compete in finances. They can't compete in terms of fan support because, of course, we don't have as many fans as those clubs do. So when you look at the competitive market, realistically, a team like Bournemouth will never ever compete with Manchester City. And of course, when you compare the two clubs, Bournemouth's a town with what, 40,000 people. Man City has a stadium that is more than 40,000, but that's not necessarily the point. In a competitive point of view, Bournemouth should be able to, in a business market, sign players in and actually be able to progress as a football club. But it'll be a feeder club because after a couple of years, when they bring a bunch of players in, they then have to sell on. Teams like City will look at Bournemouth, and this is a player in there that's good enough to play for Manchester City. They'll swoop in and get them straight away. So Bournemouth will lose their best players because they have to sell. They won't be able to keep their best players because they can't progress and they're not a big enough club to progress. And then they're not able to grow a bigger fan base or to make their stadium bigger or to be able to progress as a football club, because why would an overseas fan support Bournemouth when you've got a team like City that's going to get all the best players, that are going to be winning silverware every season? So it even stops Bournemouth from being able to actually grow fan support and being able to grow as a football club. And that's just one of many reasons and many examples I can give you of how a team like Bournemouth would never ever achieve anything in the Premier League, because it's not organic, it's not sustainable, and it's not something they can do. Leicester City back in 2016 was a sheer fluke. It'll never ever happen again. And I'm willing to bet, even though it was 10 years ago, you look at it today, you never see a team like that again. You never ever see a team be able to get above all the other teams in the league just like that. It's impossible. The Premier League is designed to stop something like that from happening, and it's just something you can't compete with. So I can sit in this video now and I can moan, I can whinge, and of course when I talk about Newcastle United, I talk about our point of view. There are several things that Newcastle could be doing more with in terms of finances, in terms of being able to bring sponsorships in. Of course, new stadium, new training ground. We'll get through this stuff once the transfer window closes. But we have a major situation behind the scenes of a player who is on strike, a player who is mainly on strike because he is not getting more money at Newcastle United. He wants around £300,000 a week. We cannot give him £300,000 a week because we have a wage structure under PSR that stops us from doing that. So we've struggled a lot this summer, and we've had real drama and real media pressure on Eddie Howe and our players because of the fact we've got the situation going on. A player who feels like he's had broken promises. Now that is happened because of PSR. Newcastle without PSR would have solved this issue. That player would be on all the money that he wants. He'll be happy. Your players at the football club would be happy, and Newcastle would bring better players in because, of course, without that tight wage structure, players will be offered more money, which means it's more enticing for them to join Newcastle. So we can talk and we can bang on about this all we want. PSR still is a problem at Newcastle, despite the fact we can spend money this summer. It's something that's always going to be there, and I would love nothing more than to make a YouTube video and to not talk about PSR and not talk about FFP. But teams continue to go around it. And this Chelsea situation with them buying players off Brighton every single summer transfer window now, while being able to have players join their own ownership, is just, I've never heard anything like that. Blue Core has signed Jordi and Suso, not Chelsea. But yeah, I walked away from this video. The way Blue Core getting around it, saying that, oh, it's not guaranteed that Suso will play for Chelsea. He has to play well at Strasbourg before he moves on to Chelsea. Stop with this rubbish. We all know he will be a Chelsea player next summer. No one is buying this for 1 minute that he might be staying at Strasbourg if he's not able to perform to the best of his ability. We know he is in a blue shirt next season for Chelsea, and it's something where I've got to credit them because it's good thinking outside the box. And our teams, if you want to complain and sit around making these videos, like, we should be doing that as well if you want to get around the rulings. But when you look at this now, mental. How on earth can ownership own the player? It's just, I've never seen anything like that before, and it's certainly yet another way that Premier League rules are just being exploited and just being looped around. And Chelsea, again, on the laws, haven't done anything legally wrong, so you have to question the Premier League rules and how that's able to happen and why this PSR thing is even still a thing. I think PSR is just ridiculous. How a team has to sell their youth players and their local players to different Premier League clubs just so you're able to get these pure profit sales to stop a team from getting a points deduction. It's just crazy. It's so anti-competitive. It's astonishing. But yeah, hopefully in this video I'll explain a bit more why Newcastle still is restricted on the PSR, despite, of course, having a lot of player sales and looking quite good organically now. But as long as PSR is still a thing, you're always going to have teams that are going to look to get around it. And Chelsea, I can't fault them. It's always them that does it, but I can't fault their smart and very good tactical business plan that's just able to always understand how to keep ahead of strict rules that prevents teams from being able to earn good profits and being able to progress with the best of the best, because they've already got incredible teams that already got money before the PSR and FFP became a thing.